Son, listen to me carefully. And what if the struggle you are trying to escape is actually the very thing God is using to make you stronger? And what if this difficult season is not proof that you have been forgotten, but proof that you are being prepared? And you have cried in silence. You have questioned yourself. You have wondered how much more you could take. There were moments when you looked at your life and said, God, why is this happening to me? But I want you to understand something today, and you are not the same man who entered this struggle. And the pressure has changed you. And the disappointment has taught you, and the rejection has awakened something inside you, and the waiting has developed your patience, and every battle you survived has given you a strength you didn't know you possessed. And son, stop looking at your scars as evidence that you were defeated, and those scars are evidence that you survived. And there are things you would never understand about your own strength if life had never challenged you. Sometimes God allows you to walk through difficult seasons because there is something inside you that comfort could never develop. And you wanted the easy road. But God knew you needed the stronger road. And you wanted everything to happen quickly. But God knew you needed to grow before you could carry what you were asking for. And maybe right now, you are standing in the middle of uncertainty. You don't know how everything is going to work out. You don't know when the door will open. You don't know when the situation will change. But hear me. And you don't need to know everything about tomorrow to keep moving today. And take another step. And keep going. And keep believing. And keep becoming. And because the man you are becoming is stronger than the circumstances trying to break you. And one day you will look back at this season and realize, and that was the season that built me. And so don't waste your pain, and don't let disappointment make you bitter, and don't let rejection make you question your worth, and don't let temporary circumstances convince you that your future is finished, and your struggle your identity. And your struggle is your training ground. And today I want you to understand 6 powerful truths about what God may be developing inside you through this difficult season. Son, there is a strength inside you that you will never discover while everything is easy. There are parts of you that only come alive when life becomes difficult. You may not understand why you had to walk through certain situations, why certain people left, why some opportunities disappeared, why you had to struggle while it seemed like everybody else was moving forward. But sometimes the season that feels like it is breaking you is actually revealing what was already inside you. And think about a tree standing through a storm. When the wind becomes violent, the tree bends, its branches shake, its leaves fall. It looks like the storm is destroying it. But underneath the ground, something else is happening. The roots are holding tighter. The tree is developing strength where nobody can see it. And when the storm finally passes, the tree is still standing. And son, maybe that's you. And you have been through storms that nobody knows about. You smiled around people while carrying pressure inside. You answered, I'm fine, when you were struggling to keep yourself together. You went to work when you didn't feel motivated. You kept taking care of responsibilities when your own heart was tired. You kept moving when you didn't have all the answers. And maybe you thought that because you were struggling, you were weak. And no, and the fact that you kept going when you wanted to quit is evidence of strength. And look at your own life. There was a time when you thought you could never survive something that happened to you. Maybe you lost an opportunity you desperately wanted. Maybe someone you trusted walked away. Maybe you experienced failure after putting everything you had into something. Maybe you spent months trying to figure out what direction your life was going to take. And at that moment, you probably thought, how am I going to get through this? But somehow you did. And you woke up the next morning. And you got out of bed. And you continued your responsibilities. And you kept learning. And you kept trying. And you kept believing that your life could become better. And that is strength. And strength doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes strength looks like quietly getting up one more time. And sometimes strength is sending another application after receiving 10 rejections. And sometimes strength is starting your business again after losing money. And sometimes strength is studying again after failing an exam. And sometimes strength is trying again after somebody laughed at your dream. And sometimes strength is walking away from something that is destroying your peace even when your heart wants to stay. And you have to stop measuring your strength by how easy your life looks, and measure it by how many times you have fallen and still decided to rise. And son, don't be ashamed of the battles you had to fight. Those battles taught you something comfort never could. And when everything is available, you don't always learn discipline. And when everything goes according to plan, you don't always learn patience. And when everybody supports you, you don't always discover how deeply you can believe in yourself. But when the applause disappears, when the doors close, when the phone stops ringing, when nobody's encouraging you, that's when you find out what you're really made of. And that's when you learn to keep moving without applause. And that's when you learn to work without recognition. And that's when you learn to believe without immediate evidence. And then that kind of strength cannot be purchased, and it is developed. And think about an athlete. Nobody sees the thousands of hours of training behind the performance. People see the victory, but they don't see the early mornings. They don't see the exhaustion. They don't see the painful repetitions. They don't see the days when the athlete wanted to stop. But the pressure of training created the ability to perform. And your life can work the same way. And the pressure you're experiencing today may be developing the capacity you will need tomorrow. And maybe you are frustrated because things are taking longer than expected. But what if this delay is developing patience? And maybe you're frustrated because people don't recognize you. But what if this season is developing confidence that doesn't depend on applause? And maybe you're frustrated because you failed. But what if failure is teaching you how to approach the next opportunity with greater wisdom? And you don't have to love the struggle to learn from it. And you don't have to pretend that everything is easy. And you can admit that you're tired and still keep moving. And you can admit that you're disappointed and still have hope. And you can admit that you don't understand what God is doing and still trust that your story is not finished. And there is a difference between being tired and being defeated. And you may be tired, but you're still here. And you may be disappointed, but you're still moving. And you may have cried, but you still got back up. And that means the struggle has not won. And son, never allow one difficult chapter to convince you that the entire book is finished and you are still becoming. And there are lessons you haven't learned yet, opportunities you haven't encountered, yet people you haven't met yet, and versions of yourself you haven't discovered yet. And so don't curse the person you are becoming because of the pain you are experiencing today. And instead, ask yourself, what is this season teaching me? And what is it developing in you? And what weakness is becoming discipline? And what fear is becoming courage? And what disappointment is becoming wisdom? And what pressure is becoming strength? And because one day you may look back at this exact season and say, I didn't understand it while I was living through it, but now I see what it produced in me. And you will realize that you became more disciplined and more patient and more focused and more careful about who you trusted and more courageous about pursuing your purpose and stronger than you ever imagined. And so keep going, son. And don't quit because the road became difficult. And don't turn around because the process became uncomfortable. And don't assume that difficulty means you're going in the wrong direction. And sometimes the hardest road produces the strongest version of you. And the storm may shake you, but it does not have to destroy you. And the pressure may test you, but it does not have to define you. And the struggle may hurt you, but it can also develop you. And when you finally stand on the other side of this season, you won't just be grateful that the struggle ended. And you will be grateful for the strength it built inside you. And so lift your head and take another breath and take another step. And you have survived too much to stop now. And there is still strength in you, and there is still purpose in you, and there is still something greater ahead of you. And the man who walks out of this season will not be the same man who walked into it. And he will be wiser, and he will be stronger, and he will be more prepared. And he will know something he could only learn through the struggle. And I was stronger than I ever thought I was. And son, one of the hardest lessons you will ever learn is understanding that not everybody who starts the journey with you is supposed to finish it with you. Some people will walk beside you for a season, some will help you for a moment, and some will disappear exactly when you need them most. And yes, it hurts. It hurts when someone you trusted changes. It hurts when someone you expected to support you becomes distant. It hurts when you discover that the person you thought would always be there was only there when everything was convenient. But listen to me carefully. Don't allow somebody else's departure to become the reason you abandon yourself. And there comes a moment when you have to stop asking, why didn't they stay? And start asking, what is God teaching me now? And because sometimes God allows certain people to step away so you can discover that your future was never supposed to depend entirely on them. And think about a young man who has a dream of building something meaningful. He tells everyone around him about it. At first, his friends encourage him. They tell him, you can do it. They celebrate his ideas. But when the work becomes difficult, those same people stop answering his calls. They laugh at his plans. They tell him that his dream is unrealistic. And at first he feels defeated and he thinks, maybe they're right. Maybe I can't do this. But then something changes and he stops waiting for their approval. And he wakes up early and he learns and he practices and he works and he makes mistakes and he starts again. And slowly he becomes the person who no longer needs applause to keep moving. And that is a powerful transformation. And son, you cannot build a strong future while constantly depending on people who change their minds about you. And people have their own struggles. They have their own fears. They have their own limitations. Sometimes they don't support you because they don't understand your vision. Sometimes they don't support you because they are afraid you might become something they never had the courage to become. And sometimes they simply aren't meant to walk with you anymore. And don't hate them. And don't chase them. And don't spend your entire life trying to convince someone to recognize your value. And let them go with peace. And you have a destination to reach. And there are moments when you will have to walk alone, not because you are unwanted, but because God is teaching you how to stand without leaning on everybody around you. And think about a child learning to walk. In the beginning, the child needs someone to hold their hand. They fall, they get back up. They reach for support again, but eventually there comes a moment when the child takes a few steps without holding anyone, and that moment is uncomfortable, and the child is uncertain, and the child may fall, but that's how walking is learned. And you cannot learn independence while constantly being carried. And sometimes your difficult season is teaching you how to stand. And maybe you've been waiting for somebody to rescue you, and waiting for somebody to call, and waiting for somebody to open a door, and waiting for somebody to finally recognize what you're capable of. But what if God is saying, son, stand up, and not because nobody cares about you, and not because you don't need people, but because you need to understand that your destiny cannot depend on everybody else's availability. And people can encourage you, but they cannot become the foundation of your identity. And people can help you, but they cannot carry your entire purpose. And people can open opportunities, but they cannot determine your ultimate future. And when you understand that something powerful happens inside you, and you become less desperate for approval, and you stop chasing people who don't value you, and you stop begging people to stay, and you stop explaining yourself to everyone, and you stop allowing somebody else's opinion to determine how you see yourself. And you begin to say, I know who I am and I know where I'm going. And son, there is freedom in that. And imagine how much energy you have wasted worrying about what other people think. And think about the nights you couldn't sleep because someone ignored you. And think about the times you questioned yourself because someone criticized you. And think about the opportunities you almost abandoned because someone told you that you weren't good enough. And now imagine taking all that energy and putting it into your growth. And imagine studying instead of worrying, and working instead of complaining, and building instead of begging, and learning instead of comparing, and praying instead of panicking. And that is where your power begins to return. And you don't need everybody to believe in you. And you need enough courage to continue when they don't. And remember this, sometimes the people who leave your life create space for the people who are actually aligned with where you're going. And you cannot hold on to every relationship and still expect to become everything God called you to become. And some connections have expiration dates, and some relationships belong to an old version of you. And some people knew you before you developed discipline, confidence, wisdom, and vision. When you begin changing, the relationship may change too. And that's okay. And growth sometimes changes your circle. And don't be afraid of that. And if someone walks away because you decided to grow, let them walk. And if someone stops supporting you because you decided to take your future seriously, let them go. And if someone only respects you when you're useful to them, understand what that relationship was really built on. But don't become bitter, and become wiser. And there is a difference. And bitterness says, nobody can be trusted. And wisdom says, I will be careful about who I trust. And bitterness builds walls around your heart, and wisdom builds boundaries around your life. And you don't have to become cold because somebody hurt you. And you don't have to stop loving people because somebody disappointed you. And you simply need to stop handing people the responsibility for your happiness, your confidence, and your future. And son, God did not give you a purpose that requires everyone to approve of you. And your path will not always make sense to other people. And your timing will not always make sense to them. And your decisions will not always make sense to them. But if you know that you are growing in the right direction, keep moving. And there will be seasons when nobody claps for you, and keep going. And there will be seasons when nobody notices your effort, and keep going. And there will be seasons when you have to encourage yourself and keep going. And because one day you will realize that the season when you felt alone was actually the season when you discovered your own strength, and you learned how to stand, and you learned how to make decisions, and you learned how to trust God without needing constant confirmation from people, and you learned how to keep moving without applause. And that lesson will stay with you for the rest of your life. And so don't waste another day chasing people who have already decided to walk away. And don't spend your future trying to repair a relationship that God may be using to teach you something. And wish them well, and release them, and forgive them, and keep walking. And because your future is too important to place in the hands of people who were only meant to be part of your past. And son, lift your head, and you are not abandoned, and you are being strengthened, and you are not forgotten, and you are being prepared, and you are not walking toward an empty future, and you are walking toward the person you are becoming. And sometimes you have to walk without the crowd before you discover the courage within yourself. And so stand and trust God and believe in the process, and keep moving forward. And because the moment you stop depending on everybody else to carry you is the moment you discover that God gave you the strength to carry yourself through the season you thought would destroy you. And son, I know waiting can be one of the hardest things you ever experience. You can handle hard work when you know the reward is coming. You can handle sacrifice when you can see the destination. But waiting without knowing when things will change, that is where many people become discouraged. And you prayed for the opportunity, but it hasn't arrived. You worked for the promotion, but somebody else received it. You started something with excitement, but months later, you are still waiting for results. You thought your life would look completely different by now, but you're still standing in the same place asking yourself, when is my time going to come? And listen to me, son. And just because you are waiting does not mean nothing is happening. And sometimes the most important work is happening where your eyes cannot see it. And think about a farmer. He plants a seed into the ground, covers it with soil, and then waits. For days, the farmer may see nothing. He doesn't dig up the seed every morning saying, why isn't it growing? He understands that something is happening underneath the surface. And the seed is developing roots before it produces fruit. And your life can be like that. And you may look at your circumstances and see nothing changing. But that doesn't mean God is doing nothing. There may be growth happening inside you before there is visible change around you. And maybe you're becoming more patient. And maybe you're becoming more disciplined. And maybe you're learning how to manage money. And maybe you're learning how to control your emotions. And maybe you're becoming wiser about relationships, and maybe you're learning how to make decisions without rushing. And perhaps the reason you are frustrated with the waiting is because you are only looking at what you don't have yet. But son, look at what is being developed inside you. And there was a time when you couldn't handle waiting without becoming angry, and now you're learning patience. And there was a time when rejection destroyed your confidence, and now you're learning to keep moving. And there was a time when one bad day made you believe everything was over, and now you understand that one bad day is just one bad day, and that's growth. And waiting is teaching you something that instant success never could. And it is teaching you how to remain steady when circumstances are unstable. And anybody can be confident when everything is going well. And anybody can smile when the money is coming. And anybody can feel hopeful when the door is already open. But can you remain hopeful when the door hasn't opened yet? And can you continue working when nobody is watching? And can you continue preparing when nobody is applauding? And can you continue believing when you don't have evidence yet? And that is where patience becomes powerful. And son, don't rush the process because you're uncomfortable. And some things take time because you are not only waiting for the opportunity is waiting for you to become ready for it. And imagine giving a teenager the keys to a powerful car before they know how to control it. The car may be valuable, but without maturity, it can become dangerous. And sometimes you are asking God for something that requires a version of you that hasn't developed yet. And you are asking for greater responsibility, but you are still learning discipline. And you are asking for more money, but you are still learning how to manage what you already have. And you are asking for influence, but you are still learning how to handle criticism. And you are asking for a bigger platform, but you are still learning how to remain humble when people disagree with you. And you are asking for the next level, but the current level is still teaching you lessons you will need later. And don't despise the classroom because you want the graduation. And the classroom is preparing you for the moment you've been praying for. And think about someone who wants to become successful in a career. They send application after application and hear no again and again. They begin to wonder if they should give up. But during that waiting period, they learn new skills and they improve their communication and they become better at interviews and they build their confidence and they study the industry and they meet new people. And then one day the opportunity comes and they realize something and the waiting wasn't wasted and it prepared them. And son, maybe your waiting season is doing the same thing for you. And you may be frustrated because you cannot see the results yet, but don't confuse invisible progress with no progress. And a building takes time before people see the final structure, and a child takes years to grow, and a skill takes repetition, and a business takes consistency, and a strong character takes experience. And a meaningful future often requires preparation that nobody celebrates. And so stop comparing your timeline to somebody else's. And you don't know what happened behind their success. And you see the finished product, but you don't see the years of preparation. And you see the promotion, but you don't see the nights they studied. And you see the business, but you don't see the failures. And you see the confidence, but you don't see the years they spent overcoming insecurity. And your journey is yours. And your timing is yours. And your preparation is yours. And if you keep comparing your chapter 3 to somebody else's chapter 20, you will become discouraged for no reason. And stay focused on your own page. And there is something powerful about learning how to wait without becoming bitter. And you can wait and still work. And you can wait and still prepare. And you can wait and still improve. And you can wait and still dream. And you can wait and still believe. And waiting does not mean sitting around doing nothing. And waiting means preparing while trusting the timing. And so if the door hasn't opened yet, sharpen your skills. And if the opportunity hasn't arrived yet, improve yourself. And if the relationship hasn't appeared yet, become emotionally healthier. And if the business hasn't grown yet, learn your market. And if the breakthrough hasn't come yet, strengthen your discipline. And use the waiting season. And don't waste it. And because one day, the thing you've been waiting for may finally arrive and you will need everything this season taught you. And when that moment comes, you won't just be grateful that you received the opportunity, and you will be grateful that you were prepared to handle it. And son, don't allow impatience to make you abandon something that simply needed more time. And a seed doesn't become a tree overnight. And a dream doesn't become reality overnight. And a person doesn't become strong overnight. And everything valuable takes development. And so breathe and slow down and trust God and keep working and keep learning and keep preparing. And your not yet is not necessarily a never, and sometimes not yet simply means keep becoming. And when your moment comes, you will understand why you had to wait. And you will look back and say, now I understand. I wasn't being denied. I was being prepared. And so don't give up in the waiting room. And your story is still moving. And your roots are growing. and your character is developing, and your strength is increasing. And even when you cannot see the progress, God can. And keep your faith, and keep your patience, and keep your hands working. And because the season you are waiting to escape may be the very season that prepares you to carry everything you have been asking God to give you. And son, I need you to understand something that can change the way you see your entire life. Rejection is not a measurement of your worth. Just because somebody didn't choose you does not mean you are not valuable. Just because a door closed does not mean your future has been closed. Just because someone couldn't recognize what was inside you does not mean there was nothing valuable there. And sometimes people will reject you simply because they cannot see what you see. And sometimes they will say no because they are looking at your present while God is looking at your potential. And then sometimes a closed door is not punishment at all. Sometimes it is protection. And think about a young man applying for his dream job. He prepares for days. He studies the company. He practices his answers. He walks into the interview believing this could finally be his opportunity. Then a few days later, he receives an email saying, "We have decided to move forward with another candidate." And he feels crushed, and he begins questioning himself. And maybe I'm not good enough, and maybe I'm not talented enough, and maybe I'll never succeed. But what he doesn't know is that the rejection is not the end of his story. And months later, another opportunity appears. He applies again. This time he gets the position. The experience he gained from the first interview makes him more confident, more prepared, and more capable. And what looked like rejection was actually preparation. And son, sometimes the no is preparing you for a better yes. But when you are standing in front of the closed door, you don't always understand that. And all you see is disappointment. And you don't see the future. And you don't see the reason. And you don't see what is coming next. And that's why you have to learn not to judge your entire life based on one closed door. And one rejection does not define you. And one failure does not define you. And one person's opinion does not define you. And one bad season does not define you. And you are bigger than the moment that disappointed you. And think about how many successful people experienced rejection before they experienced recognition. They were told no. They were overlooked. They were criticized. They were underestimated. But they refused to make someone else's rejection their identity. And that is the difference. And you can experience rejection without becoming rejected in your own mind. And some people get rejected once and then spend years rejecting themselves. And that's the tragedy. And someone says, "You can't do it." And you start repeating it to yourself. And someone says, "You're not good enough." And suddenly you stop trying. And someone walks away and you decide you're unlovable. And someone doesn't appreciate your work and you decide you're worthless. And no, son. And don't give somebody else that much power over your identity. And people can misunderstand you, and people can overlook you, and people can underestimate you, but they don't get to define you. And God knows what He placed inside you. And sometimes you have to keep believing in that potential before anyone else can see it. And look at a diamond before it is polished. It doesn't look like the finished product. It is rough. It is buried. It doesn't immediately attract attention, but its value was there before anybody recognized it. And you may be in a rough season right now, and you may feel overlooked, and you may feel invisible, and you may feel like nobody sees your effort. But don't confuse being unnoticed with being without value. And there is a difference. And just because people don't applaud you doesn't mean your work is meaningless. And just because people don't recognize you doesn't mean you have nothing to offer. And keep developing, and keep learning, and keep improving, and keep becoming. And because sometimes recognition comes after preparation. And sometimes the people who rejected you will eventually see the version of you they couldn't recognize before. But don't make that your motivation. And don't live your life trying to prove people wrong. And live your life becoming everything God created you to become. And there is a dangerous trap in spending your life trying to make somebody regret rejecting you. And you wake up thinking about them. And you work thinking about them. And you succeed thinking about them. And you measure your progress by whether they notice. And that's not freedom. And freedom is when you can say, "You didn't choose me and I'm still going to be okay." And freedom is when you can walk away without bitterness. And freedom is when you can close the chapter without destroying yourself. And freedom is when you realize that your worth was never dependent on their decision. And son, sometimes God will close a door that you desperately wanted open because he knows something you don't know. And you may cry over a relationship that ended, not realizing it was protecting you from years of pain. And you may be disappointed about a job you didn't get, not realizing another opportunity is coming that fits your gifts better. And you may be frustrated because a plan failed, not realizing that the failure redirected you towards something more meaningful. And you see the closed door, and God sees the whole hallway, and you see today, and God sees tomorrow. And so don't fight every closed door. And sometimes you need to accept it, learn from it, and keep walking. And there is another door, and there is another opportunity, and there is another chapter. And even if you don't know what it looks like yet, keep moving. And son, rejection can either make you bitter or make you better. And choose better. And let rejection teach you. And let it sharpen you. And let it make you more resilient. And let it teach you to stop depending on applause. And let it teach you to value yourself. And let it teach you to become comfortable walking alone when necessary. But don't let it convince you that you are worthless. And you are still valuable when nobody chooses you. And you are still worthy when somebody leaves. And you are still capable when you fail. And you are still growing when your progress feels slow. And you are still becoming even when nobody recognizes the change. And remember the young man who received that rejection email. Imagine if he had stopped applying after the first no, and he would have never discovered what was waiting for him. And that's why you cannot allow one rejection to become the conclusion of your story. And keep applying, and keep creating, and keep learning, and keep showing up, and keep believing, and keep moving. And because sometimes the door that closes today is simply redirecting you toward the door you were meant to walk through tomorrow. And then when that door finally opens, you will understand why God didn't allow you to settle for the first one. And so lift your head, son. And don't beg for a seat at a table where you are constantly made to feel unwanted. And don't chase people who have already decided not to value you. And don't shrink yourself just to fit into somebody else's expectations. And walk with dignity, and walk with patience, and walk with faith. And remember this, and a rejection is a decision someone made about an opportunity, not a final judgment about your worth. And you are still becoming, and you are still growing, and you are still capable, and your story is still being written. And so let the no teach you without letting it destroy you. And let the closed door redirect you without making you stop walking. And because the right door does not require you to destroy your identity just to get through it. And keep moving, son. And what God has for your life cannot be measured by the people who failed to recognize you. And your worth existed before their approval. And your future can continue long after their rejection. Son, there is something you need to understand about pain. You cannot always choose what happens to you, but you can choose what you become because of what happens to you. Pain can break your confidence, or it can build your character. It can make you bitter, or it can make you wiser. It can become the reason you stop believing in your future, or it can become the experience that teaches you how to walk into your future with greater wisdom. And you have been through things you never expected to experience. You have had moments that changed the way you look at people. Relationships, success, failure, and even yourself. There were moments when you probably asked, why did this happen to me? But sometimes the answer doesn't come while you're inside the pain. Sometimes you understand the lesson only after you've walked through the season. And think about someone who trusted a person completely only to be betrayed. At first, the pain feels unbearable. They feel angry. They feel foolish for trusting. They may even decide that they will never trust anyone again. But with time, they begin to understand something. And the lesson wasn't to stop trusting everybody. And the lesson was to become wiser about who deserves their trust. And that's the difference between pain and wisdom. And pain says, never trust again. And wisdom says, trust but pay attention to character. And pain builds walls. And wisdom builds boundaries. And pain says, everyone is against me. And wisdom says, I need to understand people better. And son, don't allow one painful experience to teach you the wrong lesson. And if somebody betrayed you, don't become a betrayer. And if somebody lied to you, don't become a liar. And if somebody mistreated you, don't become cruel. And if somebody abandoned you, don't abandon yourself. And take the lesson without carrying the poison. And that's maturity. And your pain should teach you, not control you. And think about someone who loses money in a business. They may feel embarrassed. They may feel like a failure. They may think, I should have never tried. But if they study what happened, they can discover where they went wrong. And maybe they didn't manage their finances properly. And maybe they trusted the wrong person. And maybe they didn't understand their customers. And maybe they moved too quickly. And the loss hurts, but the lesson becomes valuable. And the next time they build something, they are not the same person. And they are more careful and more informed and more disciplined and more prepared. And the money was lost, but the wisdom remained. And son, sometimes you don't realize how valuable wisdom is until you have paid for it with experience. And that's why you should never waste your pain. And if you cried, learn something. And if you failed, learn something. And if you were rejected, learn something. And if you made a mistake, learn something. And don't just ask, why did this happen? And ask, what can this teach me? And that question can change your life. And because when you start looking for lessons instead of only looking for reasons to complain, you begin to grow. And maybe that difficult relationship taught you what boundaries look like. And maybe that failed opportunity taught you to prepare better. And maybe that financial struggle taught you discipline. And maybe that season of loneliness taught you how to become comfortable with yourself. And maybe that disappointment taught you that you cannot build your entire identity around the approval of other people. And the pain was real, but the growth can be real too. And son, you don't have to pretend the pain didn't hurt. And you don't have to smile and say everything was wonderful. And some experiences hurt deeply. And some nights are difficult. And some memories take time to heal. But healing doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. And healing means the experience no longer controls your future. And you remember what happened, but you don't live there anymore. And you learn from the past, but you don't allow the past to become your prison. And that is wisdom. And look at an experienced driver. They know how to navigate dangerous roads because they have driven through difficult conditions before. They have learned what happens when you speed on a wet road. They have learned to slow down when visibility is poor. They have learned to pay attention to signs, and experience changed the way they move. And your life experiences can do the same. And maybe you used to trust everybody immediately, and now you observe. And maybe you used to make emotional decisions, and now you pause. And maybe you used to react to every insult, and now you protect your peace. And maybe you used to chase people who didn't value you, and now you recognize your worth and walk away. And that is not weakness. And that is growth. And son, don't be ashamed that you are not the same person you were 5 years ago. And you were supposed to change. And life taught you, and experience taught you, and pain taught you. And hopefully those lessons are making you wiser instead of harder. And there is a difference between becoming strong and becoming cold. And strength allows you to love without losing yourself. And wisdom allows you to trust without ignoring warning signs. And maturity allows you to forgive without giving someone unlimited access to your life. And you can have a good heart and still have strong boundaries. And you can forgive somebody and still decide not to return to the same situation. And you can wish someone well and still walk away. And you can release anger without reopening a door that should remain closed. And that's what wisdom looks like. And son, sometimes your greatest lessons will come from the moments you wish had never happened. And you may not thank God for the pain itself, but you can thank him for the strength, wisdom, and maturity that came from surviving it. And one day somebody may come to you with the same problem you once faced, and they may be confused, and they may be hurting, and they may feel like giving up. And because you have walked through that valley yourself, you will know what to tell them. And you'll be able to say, I know it hurts, I have been there, but you can get through this. And that's when you realize your pain was not completely wasted, and your experience became wisdom, and your struggle became understanding, and your wounds became evidence that you survived, and your story became something that could encourage someone else. And So don't spend your life asking God to erase every difficult experience, and ask Him to give you the wisdom to understand what the experience is teaching you. And because sometimes the blessing is not that the situation never happened, and sometimes the blessing is who you became after it happened. And you are stronger because you survived, and you are wiser because you learned, and you are more careful because you experienced consequences, and you are more patient because you have waited. And you are more compassionate because you know what pain feels like. And you are more prepared because you have already faced things that once terrified you. And son, your past does not have to control you. And let it educate you. And let it refine you. And let it make you wiser. But don't let it make you bitter. And take the lesson. And leave the poison. And take the wisdom. And release the resentment. And take the experience. And keep moving forward. And because your greatest strength may not come from everything that went right in your life, and it may come from the moments that went completely wrong and taught you how to become the person you were always capable of becoming. And so when you look back at your painful seasons, don't only see the tears and see the lessons, and don't only see what you lost and see what you gained, and don't only remember who walked away and remember who you became when they did. And don't only remember the door that closed, and remember the wisdom you carried through the next door. And son, your pain is part of your story, but it does not have to be the ending. And you can turn pain into wisdom. And you can turn failure into experience. And you can turn disappointment into maturity. And then you can turn yesterday's wounds into tomorrow's strength. And keep walking, and keep learning, and keep growing. And because the man who understands his pain is no longer controlled by it, and he carries the lesson, and then leaves the burden behind. And son, I want you to understand something that can completely change the way you look at your current situation. The season you are in is temporary, but the person you become through that season can stay with you for the rest of your life. You may be focused on getting out of the struggle, getting the money, getting the opportunity, getting the answer, or finally seeing the door open. But sometimes God is more concerned with who you are becoming than how quickly you get what you are asking for. And you are looking at the situation and saying, God, get me out of this. But perhaps the deeper question is, God, what are you developing in me while I'm here? And because if you leave the season without learning the lesson, you may find yourself facing the same struggle again in a different form. And think about a person who wants to become physically strong. They don't become strong by wishing for strength. They have to train. They have to repeat difficult movements. They have to experience discomfort. They have to remain consistent even on days when they don't feel motivated. And the discomfort is temporary, and the strength remains. And your life can work the same way. And maybe you're in a season where everything feels uncertain. Maybe you don't have the income you want. Maybe your career isn't where you imagined it would be. Maybe your plans have been delayed. Maybe you're working hard and still don't see the results. And don't waste this season by only complaining about when it will end. And use it. And if you don't have the opportunity yet, prepare for it. And if you don't have the money yet, learn how to manage what you have. And if you don't have the platform yet, develop your skills. And if you don't have the position yet, build your character. And if nobody is watching yet, practice anyway. And because one of the greatest mistakes you can make is asking God for a bigger opportunity while refusing to become the person capable of handling it. And son, imagine someone being given a leadership position before they learn how to control their emotions. Give them responsibility before they learn discipline. Give them influence before they learn humility. And the opportunity may be good, but they aren't ready for it. And sometimes what feels like a delay is actually preparation. And you may think you're being held back, but God may be building you up. And you may think nothing is happening, but something is happening inside you. And you're becoming more disciplined, and you're becoming more patient, and you're becoming more confident, and you're learning how to handle pressure, and you're learning how to make decisions, and you're learning how to recognize opportunities, and you're learning how to protect your peace. And you're becoming someone who can carry more than you could carry before, and that's why you shouldn't hate your current season. And you don't have to love everything about it, and you don't have to pretend it's easy. But you can respect what the season is producing in you. And think about a seed, and when you plant it in the ground, it disappears. And if you didn't understand how growth works, you might think the seed is gone. But underground roots are forming, and there is development happening where nobody can see it. And then one day something breaks through the surface, and people see the plant, but they don't see the invisible work that came first. And son, your life may be in an underground season right now, and nobody sees your preparation, and nobody sees the hours you're putting in, and nobody sees the battles you're fighting internally, and nobody sees how hard you're trying to become better. But don't stop just because nobody sees it. And the roots are important too. And there will be a time when your preparation becomes visible. But when that time comes, you want to have roots deep enough to handle the weight of the growth. And because getting the opportunity is one thing, and keeping it is another. And getting success is one thing, and having the character to handle success is another. And getting money is one thing, and having the wisdom to manage money is another. And getting attention is one thing, and having the maturity to handle attention is another. And so while you're waiting for the external change, work on the internal change. And become stronger on the inside, and become more disciplined, and become more focused, and become more patient, and become more intentional, and become more responsible, and become more connected to God. And because when your circumstances finally change, you want to be ready. And son, stop saying, I will start becoming disciplined when I become successful. And start now. And stop saying, I will become confident when people recognize me. And build confidence now. And stop saying, I will take my future seriously when the opportunity comes. And take it seriously now. And the person who prepares before the opportunity arrives is the person who can recognize the opportunity when it appears. And sometimes opportunities don't look like opportunities because you aren't ready to see them. And preparation changes your vision. And when you become disciplined, you notice things you used to ignore. And when you become wise, you recognize people differently. And when you become focused, distractions become easier to identify. And when you become confident, rejection doesn't destroy you. And when you become patient, delays don't control your emotions. And that's why your transformation matters. And son, your goal should not only be to get a better life, and your goal should also be to become a better man. And because if you get everything you want but remain emotionally unstable, spiritually empty, financially careless, and mentally undisciplined, you may have more things but not more peace. And God doesn't just want to change your circumstances, and He wants to develop the person who will live inside those circumstances. And so don't despise this season, and use it. And if life has given you more time, use that time to learn. And if life has given you fewer resources, become creative. And if life has given you fewer people, learn to become comfortable with yourself. And if life has given you rejection, build resilience. And if life has given you waiting, build patience. And if life has given you pressure, build strength. And don't waste the season asking why it isn't over. And ask what you can become while you're in it. And one day you may look back and realize that the season you hated was actually the season that prepared you for everything you later celebrated. And you will realize that the waiting developed patience, and the failure developed wisdom, and the loneliness developed self-awareness, and the rejection developed resilience, and the pressure developed strength, and the uncertainty developed faith. And son, your circumstances are not your identity, and you are not your current bank balance, and you are not your current job title, and you are not the number of people supporting you, and you are not the mistakes you've made, and you are not the rejection you've experienced, and you are becoming. And becoming takes time. And so don't rush the process just because you are uncomfortable. And don't compare your journey with somebody else's. And don't look at somebody else's harvest and become angry about your season of planting. And their harvest doesn't mean your planting is pointless. And keep planting, and keep watering, and keep preparing, and keep believing, and keep becoming. And because the future version of you is depending on the decisions you make today. And the man you become tomorrow is being built by what you do when nobody is watching today. And so son, focus less on escaping the season and more on becoming stronger inside.